was standing by my window on a cold and cloudy day when I saw the hearse come rolling to carry my father away. With a shirt off, me unbroken, by and by, oh, by and by, is a better overwhelming in the sky, in the sky. I think my dad would love this next verse because he was always so formal and informal at the same time. I said to the undertaker, undertaker, please drive slow, 'cause that body that you're hauling, well, I hate to see him go. Will the circle be unbroken by and by, Lord, by and by, is a better home waiting in the sky, in the sky. When I find those close behind them, try to stand there and be brave, but I could not keep from crying when they laid him in his grave. Will the circle be unbroken by and by, Lord, by and by, is a better home waiting in the sky, in the sky. So we sang the songs of childhood, songs of love that made us strong, songs that my dear Father taught us, hear the angels sing along. Will the circle be unbroken by and by, Lord, by and by, is a better home waiting in the sky, in the sky. Will the circle be unbroken by and by, Lord, by and by, is a better home waiting in the sky, in the sky. One more time, here we go. Will the circle be unbroken by and by, Lord, by and by, is a better home waiting in the sky, in the sky. Thank you guys for indulging me that. I'm sure Ted would like me to turn it down, so I'm going to do that real quick. Thank you. But I do have, this isn't on the program, but I think my dad, he actually did make this as his final request for me. I'll tell the whole story, but when it was getting close, you know, I thought maybe he would want to take all his painkillers at once and follow his own destiny, right? So it's an awkward conversation to get into with your father. And so I was sitting there waiting for my opportunity, and he said, you know, he had like a cough. And I said, oh, Dad, you need a painkiller. And he's like, no, Julian keeps them all up in the cabinet. And I was like, oh, okay. Well, what's he? Maybe he's not, doesn't have access to them. I'm like, oh, I could go get them for you. He said, well, I just wish that Julian, I thought he was going to say, you know, let me have that bottle so I could just take care of this. And he said, just wish you figured out how to get some Gene Autry in here. I'm back in the saddle again, out where a friend is a friend, where the longhorn cattle feed on the lowly gypsy wheat. I'm back in the saddle again, out on the range once more, toting back in the saddle again. Yippee-ki-yay-yo, rocking to and fro, back in the saddle again. Yippee-ki-yay, on my way, back in the saddle again. Saddle again. Out where a friend is a friend, where the longhorn cattle feed on the lowly gypsum wheat, lie back in the saddle again. Out on the range once more, my old 44, where we sleep out every night, and the only law is right. I'm back in the saddle again. Yippee-ki-yay-yo, rocking to and fro, I'm back in the saddle again. Yippee-ki-yay, I'm on my way, I'm back in the saddle again. I'm back in the saddle again. I really should have done my picture got that little smile on my dad's face when I put that song on for him. You still never really figured out the internet. You just actually that's awesome. So, anyway, I've already taken more than my time on the program, so thank you all for coming. And,
I think, Ted, you want to go? Sure.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's all right.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you so much for your hospitality, for having us here. Here, you know, go with this one.
Okay. Hi folks, my name is Ted Moss, and I'm the director of the Elfreth Museum. So,
Yeah, but Nick is the energy voice. This was Wilford.
I'm going to keep my mask.
Oh, yeah.
Okay folks, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Good, thank you. My name is Ted Moss, and I'm the director here at the Elfreth Museum. I'd like to welcome you all on this special and sad and happy and mixed emotions day. I wanted to cover just a few pieces of housekeeping. One, there is a bathroom available. It is on the second floor of this house. However, other than for the bathroom, I would ask that we not use either of these houses. We're going to keep this an outdoor event. And I will also ask that you keep distance as much as we can. I know a lot of folks are vaccinated. Not everybody is. So let's be as cautious as we can. I did not know Ed, but as the current steward of this place, that he works very, very hard to protect and preserve, and to keep telling the stories of this place. I'm very grateful for him and for his work. So, welcome all. Judy, I think you're next.
I am vaccinated. So welcome everyone. I'm the president of the Association for Electric Tour Guides, an association that Ed started in 2008. So I have some very, very big shoes to fill. Been president now for this COVID year and beyond, so I've had quite a time of it. We've done things a lot differently than before. We also have two past presidents, the other past presidents, Bob Skiba, who's right now as my vice president and my guide in all of this, and Nick, where's Nick? Nick has also served as president of the association. So I did know Ed pretty well. I came in at 2014 to the association, so it was pretty well established. And you tour guides, you're not always, like the easiest people. So a very competitive bunch. They like to talk a lot over you and tell you how much you really don't know because how much they do know. So as retired from the government, In 2014, I decided that my next career I'd love to be a tour guide in the city, and so it was really because of Ed's welcoming spirit that got me started. And the next thing I know, I was on the board here at Elfreth Alley, and then the board of APT, and so on and so on. That's Ed, right?
He had legacy.
So I do owe him a great deal, really, and to you guys as well, my other past presidents. We would like, at this point, I want to present our pin. What we do as an organization, again, which Ed started, was to make sure that the guides in the city are trained, are educated, and are eventually certified. So that you don't hear a guide say that Benjamin Franklin is standing on top of City Hall. So we have this very good training program, and once you are certified, we present you with this little pin. And I want to give this to Julianne. She is, we are making her a lifetime member. And one last thing, from great donations and interest from our membership, which is about 130 people right now, we have collecting donations, and we are going to have a memorial bench made in Ed's honor and placed back here in the garden. The bench is already ordered, and hopefully in another few weeks it will be here, and we will certainly let Julianne know and all of our membership know, and we'll have another little ceremony to be back here. Okay. Bob, would you like to say a few words?
Judy, that was great. Thank you so much. I'm Bob Skiba. I had a great pleasure and lots of fun co-authoring 2 books with Ed. And I feel like Nick, Judy, and I were presidents of APT when Ed wasn't. That's how I always looked at it when it decided not to do it, pretty much. And like many of you here who are guides, it was Ed who finagled me into being a tour guide over 20 years ago. I think there'd be about 20% fewer guides in the city if Ed didn't go around and wrangle people into doing it. And I want to make this clear, as Judy said, without Ed, there would be no Association of Philadelphia Tour Guides. Ed did more for tourism in the city and put a tour guiding profession, I think, than absolutely anyone. So we owe him a huge debt of gratitude for that. Having said that, I'm sure all of you who are guides here miss Ed as much as I do. Thank you.
Hello? So I consider my job here to keep my comments short because I know how much he is going to have wanted to hear from all of you. And so I would just say he was my best friend. He was a great man. He loved his family. My life went from black and white to technicolor when we began to date, just because he introduced the city of Philadelphia to me in a way that I just never known. He was passionate, and a lot of people here would know and agree with me that he was also really stubborn. And you didn't want to get too much in his way if he saw a project on the road. I'll never forget, one morning at 2 o'clock in the morning, he kind of poked me and he said, I have this idea about the streets from 7th down to Market. He said, we have more founding fathers in Philadelphia than anywhere else in the United States. Why aren't we celebrating that with some sort of sign or something? And it was 2 o'clock in the morning. I said, great idea, hon. And then about a half an hour later, he said, and now I know what's going to make that work. We also have a responsibility to celebrate from the bridge to Mother Bethel. as Avenue of Freedom because of the number of sites, including Congo Square, and you all can fill in Mother Bethel. And I said, it's going to happen now. I'm sure. And from that point on, nothing, and not anything that got in his way. He was just determined to go through, not around. Okay, so that's basically it. I know you can take it from here because you're tour guides. Thank you.
Good afternoon, and thank you very much for coming. My name is Christopher, and I'm Ed's son. When I was trying to think of what to say, it's hard to take my whole experience with him and put it into a couple of minutes. And so when he sits down and writes many ideas and can't remember the right word, and then looks up online the Merriam-Webster thesaurus to try and find what the right word was. And when I was still doing that very early this morning, one of the things that site has is the word of the day. And apparently the word of the day today is moxie. And I thought, I could work with that. That seems to be completely reasonable. My father, from the time that I can remember, did his job and then did many other things as well. And did other things because he cared deeply about the community, and he cared deeply about beauty and finding ways to bring beauty to the community. So some of my earliest memories are spending the weekend at what had been an old dental office, fixing up the dental office to be a daycare center at Rutgers for what at the time, back in the 1970s, would have been called non-traditional students. One of my memories since I was a little boy was all this neat stuff that was all the lead in the walls. My parents trying to keep me from touching this lead. It's heavy, but it bends, and it's really cool. But that's who he was, and that's what he did. And he organized concerts in Wiggins Park, classical music concerts, again, with this goal of bringing beauty, finding a way to bring beauty into the world. And so on through our lives. He worked, he was involved deeply in Pennsylvania Pro Musical. So we saw, and David and I saw the Messiah every year. In fact, we handed out programs at the Messiah almost every year. We worked on the mailing list, back when mailing list meant mailing, stuffing envelopes for nonprofit organizations and sending those out and doing all of those things. So he cared very deeply about the community, and he cared deeply about justice and making society a better place, and doing that as well through beauty and bringing beauty into finding ways to bring beauty into the world. So I think about Moxie, and I think about all of this, and of course you know better than I do. Well, he started with Philadelphia on foot, and so several of us got to be his practice tours as he was just getting going back 30 years ago. And you of course know in more detail than I do his history with the tour guides and about myself. But I just want to relate one episode that happened not too long ago. Not so far from the end of his life. His heart was getting weaker from the treatments that he was doing, and he wound up in the emergency room. And he wound up in what was the emergency room version of the ICU, where the nurse-to-patient ratio is 1-to-1. And he was sitting there with a smile on his face, joking with the nurses. And the very worried cardiologist, this is 11 o'clock at night, called the nurse's station to find out how he was doing. So he's sitting over here, and she's on the phone, and she goes through his vitals and goes through the shape of the scan of his heart and of his heartbeats, and says, basically sort of implying that she's kind of astonished that he's sort of breathing at all, that he's not writhing in pain, that he's not dropping in and out of consciousness, that he's sitting there joking. She relates all of this to the cardiologist, and then she looks over at him. but he's asymptomatic. And he was, and one of the reasons that he was asymptomatic is dignity was extraordinarily important to him. And being able to move through life with humor, no matter what the odds, no matter what was going on, with humor, with compassion, trying to make the world better for those just even in the same room with him, was really who he was. Rightly or wrongly, dignity for him was being asymptomatic. He cared very deeply about some of these nonprofit organizations, especially music. But I have to say the two things that he loved the most were the tour guides and Elfreth salad. And I wondered why. You know, as an adult, I'd long been out of the house, I'd gone off, done my own career. I'd seen him very passionate about earlier projects. But what was it about these two projects that really made him special? And I know one of the things about the alley that he told me over and over again, but he talked about the alley in the 18th century as a place for working class people with a variety of ethnicities. And I could tell, and I now understand even better, that what he sees in the alley from the 18th century is what his view for this country and our society for the future. And this is why it's so important, and that's why, no matter how sick he was, which I know he kept from most or all of you, because I saw a lot more of it, and I know he was keeping things from me, but he worked tirelessly to keep this alley going, because it was so important to him, because it's crucial, it's exactly the vision that he has for the future of our country. And why the tour guides? The tour guides because, as was his style, with humor and with entertainment, bringing a story to people, educating people about this reality, about the beauty of this reality, is so crucial and so important. Educating people with humor in an entertaining way that is with and recognizing the humanity of others was very important here. So it's quite fitting to be focused on the tour guides and Elfreth salad, because these two projects really were not just the last two projects of his life, but the most important projects that he did in his life. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for coming. And I'm not a tour guide, although I was one of the first victims. I mean that totally sarcastically. His passion for what he did in life and everything that he did in life and everyone he knew in life was so clearly evident. What I see in his two sons were passions that he himself had, which is love for what he did and what he was accomplishing, and love for his family. And that was so deeply profound in all the different lessons and ways that he helped guide people not only through life, making people stronger and better, but also by the fierce and intense love that he had. There was no, it's interesting to hear my mother talk about how her life went from black and white to Technicolor. I mean, besides the fact that he was always dressed in black. What I thought was so interesting was, if he loved you, if you loved what he did, you knew it. There was no question. He loved everything about what the good part of life is. But he was very also honest about the difficulty. When he had to be, he told it the exact way that it was. He was very patient. He was very kind. That patience was profound, because he wanted to make sure that if he said something, if he told you something, that it was worth telling, that it was worth being said. and that was very clear because there was, even with the jokes, you know, it was at a time that was appropriate. It was appropriately said when things were too emotional, too upsetting, too sad. He would brighten the mood because you can't take life too seriously and not care for, you know, your mental health. And he made sure that happened. But believe me, that passion and making sure that he said the right thing that you needed to hear, he took his time with it. I love being able to see all that is in him, in you all that he, you know, imparted. For me, it was a lot of mental and emotional strength, stability. And because of that, I'm here not like freaking out over public speaking like I normally do. Doing I think a decent job with my performance. That was always something he wanted me to really go after, and that, you know, I maybe wasn't even as confident as he was in my ability to be able to get, you know, a performance degree accomplished. But I think that passion that he imparted on me, not only for love of family, but for love of what I do, is really just such a strong, driving life force. And I am so privileged, as I'm sure you guys are all privileged to be here, to remember him, to memorialize him, and to live all these memories again. So I hope that we can continue to do that and share with each other. Thank you so much.
I just wanted to tell 3 specific stories.
You're like a foot taller than me.
Yes,
Sorry.
I'm Luke. So the 3 stories I want to talk about specifically that have to do with tour guides and Elfreth Alley actually are, I don't know if you remember Jess folding up the affiliate on foot actual brochures, and he would actually have us go around on South Street giving them to people, and that was how it started. And so as a guinea pig, of course, on one of his first tours, I managed to wander away. And I managed to find a little hacksaw on top of a little stone structure. And the park ranger, of course, came up to him after a while because he said, is that John on your tour? And he's like, yeah, he's my stepson. He's like, well, he's been chopping down branches off of this cherry tree in the middle of the park. He's like, I think you might want to reel him in. And more specifically to Elfreth Alley. Pop said, I don't know if he said he used to joke around all the time, you know, and friends would say, I would make a very good Santa Claus. He's like, what do you think about being Belston? So, I think it was in the middle of April, when the alley was just opening up. He had me dressed up as Belston and actually had people putting kids on my lap. And it just seemed very nostalgic to what he used to do when I was a kid. I'm sure many, and actually everybody here knows how passionate and caring he was, and the legacy that he left behind by all the loving people that truly know that even if he's not here with us, that he's still here with us. I just want to thank everyone for being here.
David.
Thought you got out of this. Didn't that guy sing for like 20 minutes? So, many years ago, a son was born to a poor, hard-working religious family. The father was a carpenter, the mother was a homemaker, and their son seemed to have special qualities, such as uncanny wisdom and uncommon strength. He's even said to have miraculously saved the lives of the people closest to him. So we should be careful. His parents were proud of their boy, and they encouraged him to become a leader in the religious community.
And he started down a traditional religious path. But eventually he veered onto his own course. He started teaching the old messages in a new way, through relatable stories and parables. As a young man, he rambled a bit, but always stayed faithful to his mission of helping others. And in his middle age, he really hit his stride, evangelizing the powerful truths of our humanity. That man didn't create these powerful messages, but he found his purpose in preaching and teaching the message to others. He brought together disciples of this important message, and the disciples became apostles, and they spread the message around the world, and the message became their legacy. That man was my dad. And you are apostles of a very powerful message that is the story of Philadelphia. I'm sure some of you might have been thinking about a guy that was born a couple thousand years before my dad. And please forgive me the bold comparison, but indulge me if you will. This is my dad's memorial, and I've got a microphone, so. But my dad was born to a religious family, and his father was a carpenter, and he did study to become a priest. And he did have uncanny wisdom and uncommon strength. And he saved the lives of his brothers and sisters in an event that some people called a miracle. And he did hit his stride when he found his purpose, which was reviving the telling and teaching of the humanity that lives within the story of Philadelphia. My dad didn't create the story of Philadelphia, but he did commit himself to retelling the story in a more powerful and more truthful way, and he dedicated himself to helping others do the same. Philadelphia is the story of common people making uncommon contributions to humanity. On this street and in this neighborhood, in just the past few hundred years, common everyday people have challenged the global paradigms, disavowed the divine right of kings, insisted on the abolition of slavery, demanded equal rights for women, and fought for religious freedom, all based on the simple, self-evident belief that all people are created equal. Love thy neighbor as thyself. Why? Because all people are created equal. My dad found his purpose in telling the stories and relating the parables of Philadelphia. And you are all an integral part of retelling those stories. Working with you inspired my dad. And for that, I thank you. And I can tell by all the people here that you feel the same way about him. If my dad were here, I'm sure he would agree that there's no better place to honor the memory of a common man who made uncommon contributions to the great message of Philadelphia than right here on Elfreth Alley. And I believe he would also take the opportunity to challenge all of you to continue doing the great work of being those apostles and telling the great stories of Philadelphia, the stories of common people making uncommon contributions and evangelizing the great truth that all people are created equal. Thank you.
George, I don't know how long it's been, but it's got to be 25 years perhaps. And who knew we would be around now still to be telling the story. Ed and I met George when he was leading a docent, not only a docent, but the house manager of, help me. Yeah, the Powell House, excuse me. And we had terrific parties in the garden, and it was just like we were our halcyon days. And when George's, I don't know if it was your first book that came out. By the way, if I had really done my homework, I would have brought, pages as long as your arm to talk about George's credentials. But Ed so admired your book, and I think we have 4 copies in our house, as being the most humane way to tell the story of Philadelphia. So from one writer to another, you were his hero. So introduce George.
I'll take this opportunity to ask Julianne to speak at my funeral. It ain't getting better than that. My name's George Mauger. I'm a historian. And use the mic. I'm shorter than Luke now. Luke, how tall are you?
6'3". 6'3".
I'm fond of saying this story every time we're in one another's presence anymore. I met Ed Major in the ballroom of the Powell House in the spring of 1996. I was a PhD fellow at the school in West Philadelphia, and I was offered the position running the place. And it seemed like a very nice, genteel way to spend the summer. I could give an occasional tour and talk to folks. That would be it. And they failed to tell me they were bankrupt at that point. So it became a very different few years. And then we got to restore the whole thing. But we were meeting Ed and nagging him and talking him into becoming a free guy who just started his business. And then soon after, I think in one of the first times we were guiding in the house alone, he told me he was smitten with the soprano. And the old fool, a soprano. And I have to admit, I had no idea how famous she was until we met each other quite a while later. As I was saying to Julia at lunch today, I well remember the first July I lived in the Powell House. And by that time, Ed and I had become so close and I trusted him so much that I gave him the key and the alarm codes, which was not a popular decision. So Ed would often, if he was giving me a tour on a rainy day, he would just wander in, and I think at least once caught me vacuuming my boxer shorts, but stuff happens. And I remember this very well because my parents had come to visit for the first time. My mother would not use the site director's apartment bathroom, so she was curling her hair in the Victorian bathroom. As Ed came on duty, and he would come out and he would raise the blinds and turn on lights. And then he would sing scales. I don't know if that many of you, I think probably everybody heard Ed sing. But he had this incredible bass voice coming up the stairs in this trot. With this booming voice going, no, 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 and as my mother came out of the bathroom, and they looked at each other and said, "I don't think you're supposed to be here." I never did have the heart to ask him, did it seem strange that a woman had come into the Powell House in a robe? Remember when ladies wore robes? So that was, and I remember that was the holiday also. You had us over, my parents were really enamored that I had friends who had a tower apartment who watched the fireworks from the living room. And I think that was the night that I held Luke on my lap. And as I've said every time, it's probably not going to happen again. Just far too good. There's so much to say about Ed, and it says, can I ask how many of you are APT members? That's a lot. Yeah. I'm a member of it officially, but I've never gotten certified. Ed and I used to dare one another every year during the certification process. Could we pass the class? and we would do the thing, well, when you wrote the textbook, when you wrote the scene. We had a lot of sparring, a lot of good times. I think he's the only person who ever regularly, as a close friend, called me a liar, and I called him the same thing. Very often we would introduce one another at public events saying, if you think I'm a liar, wait till you like Major. And I have to say, as I walk in here, I got tears coming down my cheeks because I remember a former site director. Ted, where are you? He's out. A former site director got very upset because he heard Ed giving a tour, in which Ed talked about bringing cattle in and out of that chute to graze back here for the evening. And this guy called me and said, well, you're a professional historian, and my response was, I have no damn idea if there were cows back here. It's not that important. I don't know that I personally. The Cattells probably would get angry if we tried to do it now. Maybe, I don't know. I'm the one who wanted a public bathroom back here. They turned me down on that. Ed was an incredible friend. He dreamed, a lot of us dreamed APT, but Ed dreamed it into reality. The idea that, I've got to say, and this is maybe awful to say, if any of you were guides 27 years ago,
mea culpa, but I think what Ed really did is he brought a sense of scholarship to being a tour guide. And we used to be with the Park Service when I would have the chief rangers over for drinks in the Powell House Garden. We would often turn to the, oh my God, what a guide did today. Including the woman who, when they used to wear the mop caps and the polyester dresses, who stood trying to block the entrance to Franklin Court because she didn't want any other tour guides to see it but hers. And Ed brought a dean's personality and organization and scholarship to guiding in Philadelphia and turned it into something really remarkable. I've said over and over again, those of you who were like when I did the training session last year for APT, right after the North Star, that Philadelphia is a place where my theology combines the Catholicism that Ed and I shared in our childhoods and Quakerism, which I spent a lot of time studying, and a lot of J.K. Rowling. So I've always said Philadelphia just seems to have this ability to draw the person it needs at the moment. It needs them. It did that with Frankfurt. It did that with Stephen Girard. It did that with Lucretia Mott. It did that with Richardson Dilworth. And it did that in the 90s with Ed Mauger, when he looked at a city that was having a lot of challenges and helped turn it into this Technicolor celebration of a complex. I loved hearing Ed's son talking about the diversity of the story. And Ed got that at a time that a lot of people were really happy, telling silly little stories to people who didn't care very much. He turned it into a scholarly, celebratory, challenging narrative that I think we all still tell. And he influenced this book that you say he likes so much as anyone did. The book I'm working in now will have his name prominently on it if I can ever finish typing it, if I can ever go back in a library after COVID. We shared a lot of stories, and I really appreciated seeing Ed's granddaughters today dumping Madeira onto his grave. Grandma and I knew each other so long, I'm the one who told him the story about the vat of Madeira, that Franklin is not buried in, but we were friends then. I'm supposed to be up here as a provocation. You can certainly do better than I can, so others of you who want to share Ed memories, please come up and do. I'll also, for those of you who couldn't make it to the morning ceremony where we put Ed's ashes to rest, I will give you all, especially those of you who are guides, I'll give you this. I find Philadelphia to be painfully quiet for the last year and 2 days. I stand in the alley and I hear Ed's voice ringing down there. I hear it no matter where I was or who I happened to be standing next to. Ed Mauger always greeted me with the same, George Boudreau! I could never get my voice down to these limits. But no matter what, and every challenge he helped us reach. Go visit Ed's grave when you have a chance. I love that Julianne gave him, one of you said it was a tomb with a view.
A tomb with a view.
Which I have to say, that was one of the most moving things I've ever seen, because Ed is now forever physically on a bluff overlooking the Schuylkill River, with rowers in the distance and historic bridges, and Kelly Drive zooming close by, and I could just see him on his bicycle. If you didn't ever see Ed on his bike, it was a memorable thing. And right down to the black satin shorts zooming up and down Kelly. He nearly caused me to have an accident several times as I drove in from the northwest. But it's wonderful to be here with y'all and miss this wonderful friends. At this point, I was going to do a few Billie Holiday numbers. Someone come and talk. And I'm vaccinated, so I don't think I sprayed too much.
So please remember, don't be shy. It's too cold for that. Right? If you wait another half hour, you'll lose your entire audience. So as tour guides, you know how important that is.
And the use of your feet, probably.
He didn't know I was going to do this, and I didn't know I was going to do this, but Rob could tell it was his child. I was the teacher many times. And loved it. But the neatest thing you have to know is that he actually, Rob, who's not a fashion person, put all black on today in honor of Ed. Just that at him. So, thank you. We've been on the island for 45 years. We're the old people now, but loved it. I'm not going to put Rob in this situation where he has to talk, but I want him to come up. Can I be made? Sure I can. But I know that Rob loved it and was so involved in the guy. And Rob can do things and remember all the facts and stuff, but I just wanted you to know that he actually put the black on today, so in honor of Ed, which is really very unusual and special to this. And thank you all for doing this today.
I'm going to remind you that my dad was fashion forward, so he was wearing the black vest way before it became the thing. So go out and get yourself some silk long johns and some satin silk shorts, because they're going to be really popular in the very near future. I'm telling you, he knew what he was doing. Or it's just proof that if you wear the same thing long enough, it comes in style. So I'm looking for volunteers. And I thought George did a nice job of really teeing things up. And thank you so much for getting up to speak. But if there's anybody who would like to get up and speak, this would be a great time. All right. Volunteer? Awesome. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Teresa Miller, and I met Ed in 1980. I was working in Camden City at the Department of Parks and Recreation, and Ed was at Rutgers. And we were collaborating a lot to start a lot of good programs, and so we approached Rutgers University, Camden City did, and that's where I met Ed. Well, Ed asked me to serve on a committee at Rutgers, and we started noontime concerts for the residents. And then that turned into evening concerts on the waterfront at Wiggins Park that I think one of his sons had mentioned earlier. I'll never forget the phone call when Ed was screaming through the phone that he had just booked Whitmore Salas. So Ed really, really set his goals high, and it was really a privilege and an honor to work with him and to call him a friend. But one story that I've told David and Chris, and they were there that night with me, and I've never forgotten it, and I've told the story to so many people. But when you talk about justice and trying to make people feel good and taking care of people, David and Chris were maybe middle school age, and I called Ed up one day and I said, Ed, I have tickets to the Palestra to see some college basketball. Would you and the boys be interested in going? And he said, absolutely. So we got in his van, and the four of us went over to the Palestra. Now, it was in January, it was bitter cold out, and we came out about 10:30, and there was a homeless fella on the street without a coat. And we got in the van, and I'm telling you, it was below 10 degrees with the wind. And Ed took off his winter jacket, got out of the car, and gave it to that man, wrapped it up, zipped it up, and made sure he was warm, and hopped back in the car and never said a word. And the boys and I just stared at each other. And that was so profound to me, and I thought, what a lesson he was teaching his children. How could you couldn't say anything because that was such a lesson. But he was a dear friend. He sang at our wedding, my husband and I. He sang at our wedding, the folk wedding, the guitar, the singing. There was just so many experiences and so much fun that we've had. Our children called him Uncle Ed. He was just an incredible person, and I think everyone has spoke about all his love of people and love of family, and he certainly did. Anytime I spoke to him, which was quite a bit, he would go through the whole family, and he would tell me about every single person. And he loved talking about his granddaughters. He loved talking about his granddaughters. So, anyway, thank you, and we all remember Ed, and he will live in our hearts forever. Thank you.
Everyone hear me? Oh, no? Can you hear me? Woohoo!
There you go.
Oh, okay.
If you twist the bottom part there, you can bring it back up.
I'll just squat down a little bit. There we go. I will make this super short. I'm Jason's brother. He just wanted to come out and give me some words of encouragement.
He's the only one I could interrupt and not feel bad about it.
There you go. I just wanted to take the time and tell you all a quick story. It's something that stayed with me for years now. It was actually one of the Made in America concerts where we were at your apartment. And I had a chance to kind of corner Ed and just listen to him again me about stories of Philadelphia yesteryears. And I asked him kind of bluntly, like, well, if you were mayor, what would you do? What was the one thing that you would do with your powers? And he said, you see all the statues, and he pointed to City Hall, you can kind of see them. All those statues were in, and he actually used the words, Technicolor. Because they've just been tarred black. Because this is history. It is here in Philadelphia that we all need to be aware of. There's so much all around us, and it's stripping away what we've covered over. It's restoring what we already have and having that for everybody to see. It was his knowledge and his love of the depth of Philadelphia that just turned me in a different light. I've been a Philadelphia resident, but I never took the time until really seeing Ed's passion to see how much it means to him, but also to me and everybody that gets to be touched by his extraordinary gift of not only intelligence, but historical knowledge. It was very impressive, and I'll never forget it. So.
So the piece that we're about to sing is in Italian, and it says basically there was never such a shade. The word in Italian is ombra. It literally means shade from a tree. And in fact, the song, it opens an opera and it is a love song to a tree. But it also means blessed spirit, or a shade in the sense of someone who has passed on. So I thought it would be an appropriate piece. He loved it. He loved opera, he loved Handel opera, and so I thought we would be a fitting end to our memorial. Thank you all for coming.
Thank you.